Horror, the scent of dark cocoa and cardamom, drifted through the rain-slicked alleys of the French concession district in Shanghai. Beneath a black awning, hand-painted with gold letters that read, "Cocoa Rain," Cindy Jennings wiped the counter one last time before flipping the sign to open. Her boutique was small, curated, and utterly unapologetic. Like her, the glass display held truffles shaped like feathers, tiny sculptures of caramel and sea salt, and a new experimental piece, a chili lime cacao cube inspired by her mother's stew. This wasn't just dessert. It was art. It was war. It was legacy rewritten in every bite. Shanghai hadn't been easy, especially as a dark-skinned black woman with a bold attitude and sharper tongue. But winning the Marin Artisan Prize had bought her some local attention. That, and the fact that she refused to dilute her flavors for anyone. No compromises, no shrinking. Not even for men who walked in like gods fallen from the sky. The bell above the door chimed as someone stumbled inside. Wet footprints followed, chased by camera flashes flaring from the alley outside. He wore a tailored charcoal coat, an expensive frustration. His eyes, cool, unreadable, swept the room as if checking for exits. But the moment he saw her, his expression changed. Just slightly. Enough. Cindy raised an eyebrow. "If you're hiding from your wife, I charge extra." He blinked, then smiled. It was quick, controlled, but not entirely cold. "No, wife," he said, voice rich and level, just very persistent. "Acquaintances." He didn't offer a name. She didn't ask. "Tea or chocolate?" she asked, brushing a curl behind her ear. "One of them makes the world softer, the other louder." "Louder," he replied. "Always louder." She poured dark chili cocoa into a ceramic mug, slid it toward him without fanfare. He took one sip and paused. A subtle shift passed over his features. Not quite shock, but recognition. The kind of stillness that came from tasting something that didn't ask for permission to be bold. Cindy watched him, not for praise, but for truth. That's what the cocoa always revealed. "You walk like a man who knows the world owes him something," she said, her voice even, but edged with challenge. He looked up, caught off guard by the precision of her rig. "And you serve cocoa like a woman who's never owed anyone." The air between them changed. Not flirtation, not yet. But something real had moved in, like heat behind closed doors, like the faint tremble of a line neither of them had expected to cross. For a moment, Cindy almost said something softer. A question, maybe. A warning. But she didn't. She'd learned not to blink first. Instead, she tilted her head and said, "Well, drink up. Loud doesn't last long unless you're brave." He smiled at that. Slower this time. Warmer. And neither of them noticed that the rain had stopped outside. 2 days later, he returned. This time with a book in hand, pretending to read, though his eyes never quite settled on the pages. No paparazzi around, but he kept glancing toward the window, as if their absence felt more like suspense than peace. Cindy clocked him the second he stepped in. Same coat, different posture. He wasn't hiding now, but he wasn't at ease either. "I remember you," she said, folding her arms behind the counter, smirk fully intact. "The cocoa poet." He looked up, smiled faintly. "Wouldn't miss round 2, he replied, voice softer this time, like it was meant only for her. "You never told me your name," she said. "I still don't know yours," he countered, tilting his head. "Fair." There was a pause. Not awkward, not quite flirtatious. Just aware. He settled into the chair by the window, the one furthest from the door, where the light was warmest and the view was nothing but hanging ivy and quiet sky. She brought him a new flavor, lavender rose ganache in a cracked ceramic dish. "Peace in one bite," she said. He took a slow taste, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. A beat passed. "You don't believe in peace?" "Nope," she replied, unfazed. "But I do believe in moments." He looked at her longer than necessary. "And what kind of moment is this?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because it was already happening. A moment, small, weighted, unnamed. And outside, the light shifted just enough to cast a gold thread between them. Over the weeks, he kept coming back, sometimes with a new book, sometimes with nothing but silence and tired shoulders. They talked, not always about anything important, but the kind of unimportant that builds its own gravity. Music, food, cities they both hated, songs they both loved for opposite reasons. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, it was never about himself. Names, family, positions, all edited out. She teased him for it. "You know, mystery only works when I care enough to unravel it." He smirked, said nothing. She still refused to Google him, even after May, wide-eyed, whispering, cornered her one afternoon with a screenshot. "That's Liang Jinyuan," May said, barely able to breathe. "Vice Minister's son, the next prime minister probably, and he's been here 3 times this week." Cindy rolled her eyes. "I don't care if he's next in line for the moon," she said. "If he wants to impress me, he can start by not acting like the universe is his playground." But later that night, after closing, she sat in the kitchen sipping leftover jasmine ganache and stared at the spot he always chose by the window. She told herself she didn't care, but she noticed the way he drank his cocoa slowly, like it was sacred. The way he sometimes opened a book and didn't read a single word. The way his eyes softened, not when he looked at her, but when she spoke without softening herself. And sometimes she caught herself waiting for the door to creak open, wondering which version of him would show up that day, smiling, guarded, or bruised by whatever world he came from before hers. Why did a man with power and polish keep coming here, to this tiny shop run by a woman with wild hair, a Midwestern accent, and zero diplomatic subtlety? She didn't know yet, but she was starting to hope the answer wasn't simple. One evening, he lingered longer than usual, watching the steam rise from his cup like it carried thoughts he wasn't ready to say aloud. "My mother would hate this place," he said absently. Cindy didn't flinch. "Good," she said. "If she likes it, I'm probably doing something wrong." He laughed. Not the quiet, polite kind she'd heard before, but a real laugh. Uncontrolled, briefly human. It surprised them both. There was a pause after that, not awkward but aware. The kind of silence that feels like standing at the edge of something new and knowing the ground beneath you is about to shift. He glanced at her. "You're not afraid to say exactly what you think, are you?" "Nope," she said easily, folding her arms. "Scares men like you, doesn't it?" "Fascinates me, actually," he murmured, too quietly for performance, too sincerely for defense. Their eyes locked. Something flickered, small, sharp, not yet love, not yet desire, but something rooted itself in the space between them. Something dangerous in its honesty. Neither of them looked away, but outside the walls of Coco Rain, the world was tightening. At family dinners, Madame Liang laid out portfolios like battle plans. Eligible women with fluent Mandarin, clean bloodlines, and family empires of their own. All options, with future minister's wife, written in invisible ink. Every time he declined, she said nothing. But her jawline grew sharper, her silence louder. "You're 35, Jinyuan," she snapped one evening. You need a wife who won't cause problems, not some novelty." He didn't answer, but all he could hear was Cindy's laugh, unfiltered and wild, a sound that didn't ask permission to exist. One night, he stood across the street from Coco Rain long after the lights had gone out. The sky was bruised with clouds. The city shimmered quietly around him. He told himself he wasn't obsessed, that she was a welcome distraction, that he could stop this at any time. But the truth was louder in the dark. He wasn't just walking toward her anymore. He was drifting away from everything else, and even he no longer believed he could stop it. The first time Jin Yuan kissed her, it wasn't under a sky full of stars or in the warm glow of romance. It was in the back of her shop, beside an unplugged chocolate tempering machine, with cocoa powder dusting her cheek and frustration simmering just below the surface. "You can't keep showing up here like this," Cindy snapped, arms crossed, shoulders drawn tight. "People are watching. People are whispering." He didn't deny it, didn't pretend it wasn't true. He just exhaled, tired, stripped of polish. "I know." She took a step back, too close. "Then why?" "Because when I'm here," he said, voice low and cracked around the edges, "I don't have to lie." There was silence. Not the quiet kind, but the kind that throbbed. She didn't expect him to say that, and he didn't expect himself to mean it. So when he kissed her, it wasn't with practiced technique or soft music playing in the background. It was sharp, unsure, human. A man unraveling at the edges and finally reaching for something real. She stiffened, just for a second, then kissed him back, not because he was Liang Jinyuan or because he was powerful, but because in that moment he stopped pretending, and so did she. That was how it began. Their romance wasn't the kind people wrote poems about. It was made of quiet and shared breath in stolen spaces, late-night phone calls that started with silence and ended with truths neither of them had said aloud before. She memorized the sound of his knock. He memorized the scent of her hair, dark cocoa, citrus, and something unnameable, something Cindy. They didn't call it anything, didn't label it, because names meant permanence, and permanence was dangerous, but they kept choosing it, every day. One evening, after another quiet escape to the dim apartment he rented under a false name, Cindy lay across his chest, her curls pressed to his heartbeat. "You're brilliant," she said softly. "That's the first compliment you've given me all week," he murmured. She smiled but didn't look up. "You're brilliant," she repeated, "but you don't say what you mean. You say what they expect." He didn't answer. He just stared at the ceiling. "I was raised for precision." "Then use that precision to choose your truth," she said. "Stop hiding behind civility when your people are suffering." She was talking about the evictions, the policies written in ink and silence that pushed working families out of their homes. He'd read the reports, he'd known, but she made it personal. "Let your silence make them uncomfortable," she said, "not your speeches." At the next City Hall press conference, Jinyuan went off script, not recklessly, just truthfully. "Progress isn't just new buildings," he said. "It's making sure the people who built this city can still afford to live in it." The silence in the chamber was immediate. Then came the backlash. Private calls from party elders. A sharp rebuke from Minister Han, eyes narrowed like a blade. A government editorial calling him weakened by foreign influence. And of course, a summons from his mother, Madame Liang. The chandelier above them sparkled like judgment. She sat in a high-backed chair, posture perfect, her fingers folded in her lap like she was preparing a case for court. "I warned you," she began coldly, her hands folded in her lap like a judge waiting to pass sentence. "Your actions have been reckless. You've undermined the housing bill we worked on for years. You mean the one that favors developers and pushes out working families? Jin Yuan replied, voice calm but clipped. The one you sold as progress while quietly displacing thousands? Her eyes narrowed. You used to be pragmatic, strategic. Now you sound like a human being, he cut in, the words sharper than intended. His jaw set. Yes, I do. She stood then, slowly, gracefully. You think this is about justice? You are playing with matches in a house soaked in gasoline? Do you have any idea what they'll do to you when they're finished with her? He flinched, barely, but it was there. Don't talk about her like she's poison. She is not poison, Madame Liang said evenly. She is power. That's what terrifies them. A foreign woman with no leash, no allegiance, and too much influence over you. He stepped forward. She reminds me I have a soul. That used to mean something to you. Her eyes shimmered for a brief second, not with tears, with fury held in place by dignity. This is not love, she whispered. This is rebellion wrapped in perfume. A long silence stretched between them, heavy with old expectations and newer truths. Jin Yuan's jaw flexed. His voice, when it came, was quiet but unshakable. Then I choose rebellion. The annual Harmony Gala was Shanghai's most visible political event, hosted in a glass-domed ballroom along the Bund. Custom gowns, diamond alliances, photographers like vultures. The press expected him to arrive alone, or worse, with Minister Han's daughter, the one his mother still insisted would balance his image. But Jin Yuan had other plans. When he stepped out of the car, Cindy was on his arm. She wore an off-shoulder black gown with gold threadwork, her natural curls twisted into a regal updo. Her skin glowed, her expression calm. She didn't shrink under the cameras. If anything, she met them head-on. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Flashbulbs exploded. One reporter whispered, "Is that her?" The internet erupted by midnight. Hashtag Liang Affair. Hashtag Who Is She? Hashtag Scandal. In silk. Articles flew. Chinese golden boy seen with American chocolatier. Liang Jin Yuan's mystery date. A threat to national unity? But Jin Yuan held her hand tightly the entire night. 2 days later, Cindy received a call from an unfamiliar number. A black car waited outside her boutique. Inside the presidential suite of a luxury hotel, everything was designed to impress. The carved jade centerpieces, the faint scent of white tea roses, the view of the skyline like a crown. But none of it mattered. Madame Liang waited behind a lacquered tea table, posture regal, her expression serene in that unnerving way only powerful women could master. Calm, controlled, and deadly. She gestured for Cindy to sit. Without a word, she poured jasmine tea into porcelain cups that looked older than the country's current president. Then, with deliberate care, she slid a thick envelope across the table. "Enough to start over anywhere you wish," she said smoothly. "Europe, South Africa, Canada. I've prepared the logistics." Cindy didn't touch the envelope. Her fingers remained laced in her lap. "Why?" she asked. "To spare your son the shame? Or to spare yourself the embarrassment of a daughter-in-law who doesn't blend into your dinner parties?" Madame Liang didn't blink. "This life, this country, is not built for women like you to survive quietly." A beat. Then Cindy smiled. "I didn't survive quietly," she said. "I survived loudly." That struck something. Brief, sharp, and gone. Madame Liang straightened. "This is for your own dignity, before the tabloids tear it apart piece by piece, before they dig into your past, your father, that teenage shoplifting charge you had expunged. I know it all. Cindy's spine went rigid, but she didn't flinch. Not in front of this woman. You've done your research, she said quietly. So then you already know something important. I have nothing left to lose but myself, and I refuse to give myself up for free. She stood slowly, letting the silence breathe. You know what the real difference between you and me is? She said, voice like velvet wrapped around steel. You were born in a palace, and you still live like you're afraid. I was born with nothing, and I'm not afraid of you. She leaned forward, just enough to match Madame Liang's stillness with her own fire. Tell your son if he can be bought, he should stay. If not, I'm still here. She turned, walked out without a single glance back. The door clicked shut behind her. Soft, final, devastating. Madame Liang didn't move, but the steam rising from her untouched tea had started to tremble. For a brief, bright window in time, it almost felt like they could win. Despite the headlines and whispers, Coco Rain saw a steady stream of curious new customers. Journalists lingered by the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of China's scandalous sweetheart. Some came to mock, others to stare, but some returned again, for the flavors, for the warmth, for her. Cindy held her head high. Always, if the world wanted a spectacle, they would not get it for free. She'd fought too hard to dim now. And Jin Yuan, he was still showing up. Less often, more careful, but present. In the quiet hours, he'd lie beside her in the dark, their hands intertwined, and whisper, "We'll get through this. Just hold on." But power does not fade quietly, and Minister Han was watching. Dark, the video. It began like a whisper. An anonymous post on a fringe news forum, timestamped 12:07 a.m. The title, crude and screaming, exposing Liang Jinyuan, the bribe that bought a voice. The video was grainy, deliberately so. Security footage angle, dim lighting. Jinyuan, seated in a private lounge at a fundraiser weeks earlier, his face half lit by a desk lamp. A thick envelope slid across the table. Distorted voices murmured, "Reform support secured." Thanks to her influence. Full names. No context. But it didn't matter, because the world filled in the blanks. By dawn, it was on every platform. Government watchdogs posted official statements. News anchors speculated with grim satisfaction. Hashtags surged across Weibo like wildfire. Hashtag ChocolateGate. Hashtag Ling compromised. Hashtag American Mistress Scandal. Was Ling Jinyuan paid off through his American mistress? Foreign infiltration cloaked in chocolate? The fall of China's favorite son. Within hours, Jinyuan's office was raided. Internal emails flagged. Staff suspended. His inbox, once filled with policy memos and respectful greetings, became a storm of slurs, threats, betrayals. He read the first 3. The 4th one said, "You're not our future. You're her mouthpiece." He stopped opening them after that. His mother didn't answer his calls. Not once. He left 7 voicemails, each one shorter than the last. He wasn't angry, not even surprised. He sat alone in the office that night, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, the city outside humming like it was untouched by disgrace. A copy of the video played silently on loop across every news screen. He watched it once, then again, and again. He knew it was doctored. He knew it was planted. The timestamps were wrong. The audio spliced. The man across the table was a known associate of Minister Han. But the truth moved slower than the lie, and the lie had already arrived with headlines, fire, and the public's thirst for spectacle. By the end of the week, he stood behind a podium in a marble hall lit like judgment. His face was pale, carefully shaved, his suit immaculate. Like armor, the room pulsed with reporters, microphones, flashbulbs. He didn't look for his mother in the crowd. He didn't dare hope Cindy was watching. He cleared his throat. "For the integrity of our institutions and the future of public trust," he said slowly, deliberately, "I am stepping down from all positions effective immediately." The cameras clicked like hammers. The room didn't breathe. He didn't cry. But something inside him broke. Not loudly, not violently, but with the same precision he had once used to keep his life in perfect order. Cindy watched the resignation unfold on a dusty second-hand television mounted in the corner of her staff lounge. The volume buzzed faintly beneath the soft whir of the heater. "I am stepping down from all positions effective immediately." The room felt suddenly too small, too loud, too still. The cup of cocoa in her hands had gone cold, but she hadn't noticed. She didn't blink, didn't speak. For a moment, she simply stared at the screen, at him. He looked composed, polished, the same suit she'd helped him pick out for a town hall 2 months ago. He hadn't looked for the camera. He hadn't looked for her. He hadn't even said her name. She didn't cry, not at first. Instead, she pulled out her phone and refreshed her store's reviews. Then again. It took seconds for the bile to rise. Foreign parasite. He threw away his career for imported skin. "Go back home. This isn't your story." She closed the screen, tried to breathe. That night, someone shattered the front window of Coco Rain. A rock through glass. A hate note wrapped in barbed words. Her open sign, cracked and dangling like a final insult. The police didn't come. She didn't bother calling. She swept the glass herself at dawn. Bare hands. No gloves. Every shard catching light like grief. She said nothing. May tried to offer help. Cindy waved her off. "They don't get to scare me quiet." But her voice trembled when she said it. The days bled into each other. Customers stopped coming. Sponsors withdrew. Invitations evaporated. Even the chocolate began to taste bitter. Like memory, like endings. But worse than the city's silence was his. No calls, no explanation. No note slipped under the door like he used to do when he missed her opening hours. Just gone, like he'd been a hallucination. A well-spoken fever, a clean wound that never stopped bleeding. 1 week later. The silence had weight now. Not the comforting kind that hugged the corners of her shop after closing, but the sharp, breathless kind that followed grief into every room and refused to leave. Cindy stood in the center of Coco Rain, motionless. The front window had been replaced, but the new glass felt like a stranger. Too clear, too sterile. The light pouring through it wasn't warm. It was accusatory, sterile, exposing. She hadn't rearranged the shelves in days. The ganache sat untouched in the cooler. May had begged her to take the day off. She said she was fine. She was not. She was functioning, like a machine still powered, even though something vital had snapped inside. His favorite mug, the plain white one with a faint crack he always ignored, still sat in the corner near the supply sink, untouched, just waiting. She told herself to throw it out. She told herself that for 6 mornings. Instead, she walked over to it, picked it up with trembling fingers, stared at it. Her mouth opened, then closed. The ache inside her, the fury, the audacity of it all, gathered like thunder in her chest. He said he'd fight. He said they'd face it together. He let me burn while he disappeared into silence. The mug hit the wall before she realized she'd thrown it. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. So did she. Her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. She screamed, raw, wordless, until her lungs ached. And then the words tore through her, ripped from a place too deep for pride. Don't you dare love me in private if you can't stand beside me in public. It echoed across the empty shelves, off the glass, the tiles, the fragments on the floor. Her voice came back to her warped, cold, hollow, not her own. And she was alone, completely, undeniably, still here. 1 year later, the brass sign over the door gleamed in the soft morning light. Cocoa Rain, reclaimed. The word reclaimed wasn't decorative. It was earned. The new shop sat quietly on the fringe of Shanghai's French concession, wedged between a sleepy old bookshop and a rooftop apothecary that sold herbs in silk-wrapped pouches. No one loitered outside with cameras now. No whispers, no headlines about the color of her lipstick or the scandal of her smile. Just footsteps, just regulars, just peace. It wasn't the empire people once expected her to build, but it was hers. Inside, the walls were lined with hand-painted tiles, each one crafted by women-funded collectives. The cocoa came from ethical farms. The sugar was fair trade. The counters gleamed, but nothing sparkled. Everything whispered. Cindy stood behind the bar, her apron dusted with cinnamon. The early sun warmed the floor. She hadn't even flipped the sign yet. This morning she didn't rush. She let herself stand there, breathe, receive the stillness. Her circle was smaller now, but it was fierce. May had never left, even when the worst came. She was family now. The old man across the alley, the one who never spoke more than 5 words at a time, left a small bundle of jasmine at the door every Monday, tied with a red string. Someone had started a travel blog about Black-owned businesses in East Asia. Cocoa Rain was always in the top 3, but that wasn't the victory. The victory was waking up each day and still choosing to open. She learned to make smaller batches, to pour 1 extra cup every now and then, not for a customer, for herself. She always drank it, even when it was bitter, even when it tasted like the silence he left behind. Sometimes she thought of him, not out loud, never to May, just when the shop was quiet and the air smelled like nutmeg and the past felt close but not sharp. He had vanished like smoke, but some part of her still remembered the weight of his presence, the way he used to sit, hands clasped, like he was trying to learn how to stay. She didn't wait for him, not anymore, but sometimes, when she lifted that extra cup to her lips, she whispered, "If you ever return, come back real, or not at all." And then she drank it, steadily, alone, whole. Meanwhile, in Chengdu, Jin Yuan wore no suits now. No polished lapel pins, no silk ties threaded with the legacy of his family name. His hands bore ink stains. His shoes were scuffed. The calluses on his palms were no longer metaphorical. He lived above a modest tea house that smelled of rosewood and ginger, and no one there called him vice minister. No one bowed. No one asked for speeches or strategy. They just asked, "Do you want jasmine or pu'er?" And sometimes that was enough. He had joined a nonprofit that didn't care about pedigrees, just progress, grassroots housing reform, quiet, untelevised, unpaid in all the ways his old world had once worshipped. They built shelters for displaced families, rewired electrical grids, held town hall meetings no one recorded. He was one of the team now, not above it, not leading it, just present. That was the part that saved him, the doing. But at night, when the sky folded over Chengdu like a thick wool blanket and the street noise softened into memory, he'd retreat to the drawer beneath his desk, unlocked it, slowly. Inside was an old tablet, worn, protected. He didn't check the news. He checked her. Coco Rain, Reclaim celebrates first anniversary. Cindy Jennings, launches youth culinary initiative. A photo, her holding a truffle next to a child smiling so wide you could feel it through the screen. He never clicked the articles, never zoomed in. He didn't need to. Just seeing her, existing, was enough to both calm and crush him. He had told himself that leaving had been an act of protection. But some nights he whispered the truth into the dark. I left because I didn't know how to be the man she deserved. Not then. And so he stayed, out of reach, out of frame, but never gone. Each month, Cindy's legal team received anonymous deposits. They never traced the source. He made sure of that. And in a rented co-working office 2 blocks from the nonprofit, he quietly hired a private investigation firm. He gave them no formal name, just targets: Minister Han, staff logs, phone records, fundraisers, quiet assistants, silent transactions. For 11 months, he funded their work with what remained of his family trust. Money his mother had frozen until his resignation became official. And then, finally, they found it. A forged timestamp. A transfer from a dummy account linked to Han's cousin. A hidden server. A former staffer willing to speak if given legal protection and distance. The bribe had never been his. The lie had never been Cindy's. Jin Yuan never put his name on the files. He didn't call in a favor or leak it to a friend. He just handed the evidence to one investigative journalist he knew had never bowed to power, even when it glittered. Then he returned to his tiny room above the tea house and waited, not to be thanked, but to see truth finally walk without permission. It happened almost like an afterthought. A Thursday morning. Shanghai was sleepy with fog, and the air smelled like orange zest and clove. Cindy was in the kitchen, hands dusted in cinnamon, working through her new truffle batch with the kind of slow care she reserved for muscle memory. The shop hadn't opened yet. May was out front, humming a soft tune off-key. Then, footsteps. Urgent. Quick. May burst into the kitchen like the building was on fire, holding her phone out with both hands like it might explode. "Look," she gasped. "Miss Cindy, look, it's Minister Han. He's being investigated." Cindy didn't move at first. May pressed the phone into her flour-dusted hands. It's everywhere. She wiped her fingers on a towel and stared at the screen. The article loaded slowly, as if the internet itself knew it carried something sacred. The headline struck like lightning. New evidence reveals Minister Han orchestrated false bribery scandal. Source, close to Liang Jinyuan, confirms. He refused to fight dirty, but someone fought for him. Cindy's breath caught. Her heartbeat stuttered. She read every word. Slowly. Twice. It was all there. The forged video, the bribery trail, the whistleblower testimony, anonymous donors, leaked court filings, verified documents. Her name wasn't mentioned once, but his was, again and again. He didn't vanish to save himself, she thought. He vanished to save me. She sat down, hard. May hovered, wide-eyed. "Are you okay?" Cindy nodded, but the motion was fragile. She wasn't crying, but something inside her cracked open. A dam that had been holding back everything she wouldn't admit. That she'd wanted a reason to believe he hadn't just abandoned her. That she'd needed him to still be him. And now, here it was. Not in a message, not in a phone call, but in action. Quiet, long brewing, dangerous truth. By noon, Jin Yuan's name was trending again, but not as a disgrace. This time, it was reverence. Commenters posted apologies. Journalists released retractions. A trending thread called him the man who walked away from power but never from integrity. Within days, the Prime Minister's office sent formal word. A seat was open. His seat. A return was possible. He declined with 2 sentences. I never wanted the throne, only the truth. They wanted a puppet in a suit. I'd rather be a man in love. He didn't issue a press release, didn't grant interviews, didn't step back into the spotlight. Instead, he booked a one-way ticket to Shanghai. Quart. It was a gray morning in early spring, the kind where the sky hovered like a sealed promise, thick, expectant. The jasmine vines hadn't bloomed yet, but their scent hovered in the air, just beneath memory. Cocoa rain. Reclaimed was quiet, midweek slow. The world outside moved lazily, as if holding its breath. Cindy stood behind the counter in a pale linen apron, her hands steady as she aligned the final row of mango caramel bites. The shop smelled like citrus and cardamom. May had left for the flower market 10 minutes earlier. The door creaked, not the bell. The door. She didn't look up, not at first, but the silence that followed wasn't ordinary. It was specific, weighted, familiar in a way that made her spine straighten before her mind caught up. She set down the tray, slowly, and lifted her gaze. There he was, genuine, not a ghost, not a dream, a man, real, whole. No entourage, no media, no shadow of Madame Liang, no trace of the legacy that once trailed him like perfume. He wore a slim gray coat and a navy scarf that had lost its press. His shoes were scuffed, creased at the toe in that specific way that said he had walked long distances. On purpose. He looked older, not tired, tempered, like a man who had stood in fire and stayed long enough to understand what mattered. Their eyes met. She said nothing, not with hate, not with love, with silence. But this silence wasn't hollow. It was full of questions, of years, of bruised memory. He didn't flinch. Not this time. He stepped forward, slowly, pulled something from his coat pocket, placed it gently on the glass. A small, foil-wrapped object. Cocoa foil. She stared at it. Her fingers moved automatically, peeling it open like muscle memory she didn't want to remember wanting. Inside, a ring. Jade, carved into the shape of a cocoa bean. Brushed gold setting, edges worn smooth from being handled too much. He didn't rush her, didn't fill the silence. When he spoke, it was quiet, but unshaking. I ruined everything they gave me, he said, but I'm here to build what we choose, from scratch, with you. She blinked, once. Her chest rose, then fell, slow, careful. Then she leaned back, not away, just enough to observe him fully. Her expression, unreadable. And if I say no? She asked. Her voice was calm, but beneath it, a test, not of cruelty, but of truth. He didn't falter. Then I'll keep coming back, he said, not because I deserve you, but because I'm still learning how to. Her lips parted slightly, then closed. He didn't beg. He didn't move. He simply stayed, present, whole, willing. The silence that followed was no longer a wall. It was a door. And finally, she stepped around the counter, paused. Her eyes flicked down at the ring, then at him. And then she reached out, took his hand, not because the past didn't matter, but because he had returned with nothing but the truth, and she had survived enough to recognize it. They walked out together. No flashbulbs, no press, No forgiveness speech or sweeping kiss. Just two people, side by side, choosing something real. Their marriage wasn't a fanfare. It was quiet, intentional, rooted in truth, held by love, and witnessed only by those who'd stayed when everything else fell away. 5 years later, the plaque on the garden wall read, "The Cindy Project, built by fire for the future." Nestled in the outskirts of Suzhou, far from the noise of the capital and the gravity of old names, the foundation's headquarters stood quiet and proud. A sanctuary of glass and brick framed by magnolia trees and hand-painted tiles from women-led studios. Inside, a dozen women sat laughing over blueprints and chocolate truffles. They weren't clients. They were co-founders, survivors, visionaries, women who had once been dismissed as too complicated, too angry, too foreign. Now they signed contracts, hired staff, sent invoices with their names at the top. Thanks to the Cindy Project, Cindy no longer ran the daily operations. That had always been the point. Build it, then let others shape it. These days, she worked upstairs in a sunlit room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a long table scattered with cocoa beans, watercolor swatches, and letters from girls who had tasted her recipes and said, "I want to be like you." Her focus had shifted. Collaborations with indigenous farmers, culinary retreats across Africa and Asia, a children's book illustrated by one of her former interns about flavors and memory. But right now, she wasn't working. She was braiding her daughter's hair. Little Leon, 5 years old and full of imagination, sat cross-legged on the rug of her playroom, humming to herself in a tangled mess of Mandarin, English, and made-up magic. "Mama," she asked, blinking up through a curtain of curls, "why do I have spirals and Baba has straight hair?" Cindy grinned. "Because God likes contrast," she said, twisting another section with practiced hands. "And good stories need different textures." Leanne considered that like it was gospel. Cindy kissed her temple and kept braiding, slower now, savoring the moment. Downstairs, Jin Yuan set the table for dinner. A plain linen runner, 3 handmade bowls, a still warm basket of dumplings they had folded together an hour ago, laughing about the one that exploded mid-steam. He wore reading glasses now, thin, gold-rimmed ones. She teased him about his professor face, but secretly loved how soft they made him look. He taught ethics and public service at a quiet university nearby, the kind of place where students stayed late not because they had to, but because they wanted to understand how to build without harming. He turned down 3 offers to re-enter politics. The last came with a private offer from the Prime Minister. He'd simply smiled and said, "Power built on performance isn't power. It's theater. I'm done performing." Still, he consulted quietly on housing reform, whistleblower protections, equity systems. He no longer needed cameras to move the needle. He just moved it. And every month, without fail, he made a private donation to a fund for whistleblowers. He never signed his name. After dinner, the 3 of them sat on the floor to play a card game Leon insisted she made up and kept changing the rules to win. The house smelled like ginger and laughter. And later, when their daughter was asleep, tangled in blankets and fairy tales, Cindy stepped onto the small balcony overlooking the garden. Jin Yuan joined her, silent at first. Then, "You ever think about the version of us that didn't survive it?" She exhaled softly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look around and realize we didn't just survive it. We rewrote the ending." He slipped his fingers into hers. No ring. Just skin and truth. In a quiet corner of the garden, beneath the jasmine vines that now bloomed like forgiveness, a stone sat with one sentence etched in gold. "Love may break what's false, but it builds what's real." And that was the legacy they passed on. One choice at a time, one truth at a time. One life rebuilt, loudly, together. One night, after dinner, Leon fell asleep curled in the crook of Cindy's arm, cocoa-scented curls brushing against her shoulder, her small fingers wrapped loosely around a half-buttoned cardigan like it was armor. Cindy didn't move, didn't even blink, just listened to the quiet hum of the night, to the distant echo of music from a neighbor's radio, to the sound of her daughter breathing in sleep. That slow, perfect rhythm. Jin Yuan padded into the room barefoot, quiet as memory. He knelt beside them, reaching to gently tuck the girl's plush bunny under her arm. His fingers brushed Cindy's wrist in passing. Then he sat beside her, his knees drawn up, one arm lazily slung across the back of the couch. He watched their daughter for a long moment before he spoke. "I used to think legacy was about bloodlines," he murmured, "about monuments, honor, perfection." Cindy turned slightly toward him, her voice soft. "And now?" He looked at her, fully, without the weight of apology, just presence. "Now I think legacy is how you treat people when the cameras are gone, when there's nothing left to gain." She held his gaze for a beat longer, then leaned into him, her temple resting against his shoulder. "That's not legacy," she said. "That's love." A pause. His hand found hers and held it there, against the quiet, against the weight of years they both carried like hidden stitches. He smiled, not the kind that posed, but the kind that healed. And somewhere between the books on their shelf, the warm scent of cocoa in the kitchen, the echo of laughter upstairs, and the hands that had once held only broken things, something stronger had formed. Not a monument, a life, a home, a family that had no need to explain itself to anyone. And one truth they taught their daughter in 2 languages, without fanfare: love may break what's false, but it builds what's real. The end.